Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome back to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Cutuli. We are here today for Season 2, Episode number 17 with Alana Cohen. This is part 2 of the episode. In part 1, we spoke about some of the signs, symptoms, and challenges that can come into play if you have an unhealthy gut. And within this part of the episode, we're going to be speaking about some of the steps that you can take to provide a healthy measure for your child in bringing in the good bacteria within their body and providing, these steps in order to take the initiative in order to help your child alleviate some of the issues that can be at play today. So really, Alana, what could you explain what really were the first steps that you took in order to improve your daughter's gut health?
Sure, yes. So, I think that the most important thing, honestly, I know that as parents, and sometimes after hearing this, you want to kind of jump in and figure out exactly what to do. But it really is actually important to have kind of a team or another professional helping you in this because, like we spoke about a little bit earlier, there are so many different. Even within gut health, there's all these different avenues. Something might be, one strain of bacteria might have overgrown in one child, where a different strain of bacteria or fungus might have overgrown in another one. And it's really important before you start making like crazy changes to really have a professional guiding you. And there's different types of professionals that could help you with this. There's functional medicine doctors. There's holistic nutritionists. There's resources you could find, like a practitioner of a functional medicine doctor on like IFN, the Institute for Functional Medicine. They have find a provider tools. Really, I would say a really good thing to do is if you're in any like local or Facebook groups or kind of natural geared types of Facebook groups, to ask for recommendations on there. I always find that sorry about that. I always find that asking for personal referrals is a really good way to find somebody, but they can help you to basically do, first of all, they'll take the time to listen to the whole story, all of the symptoms, everything that's going on, and try to figure out the best place to start. Sometimes lab testing is recommended because it can help you get a picture of what actually is living in the gut or what actually is going on, so that you can know exactly what you need and what to treat. I think you spoke about lab testing a little bit earlier too. And when we were going through this with my daughter, we did comprehensive stool testing with Genova Diagnostics. And they were able to see exactly what was growing in her gut. And they found she had pathogenic levels, meaning that the amount of, or of a certain strain of yeast, the yeast overgrowth, a certain strain of candida, that it had overgrown to levels that it was actually considered a pathogen to the body. So they were able to tell which strain it was, and also they could see which good bacteria she was missing, so we knew what to supplement with, different types of things. So it could be really useful to start with someone to guide you in these types of first steps.
Perfect. And thank you for that. And I think, as we spoke about a little bit initially of, you said it has to be a community effort. So it can't just be, you providing, a resource for your child or even having a professional provide these resources and that's it. It has to be, not only an effort within the child, but the effort within the parent as well. And, from your perspective, I think how really are you able to associate healthy foods with, being good for your child? And, how are you able to set a good example for your child in order to, like you said earlier, the big step of changing the pantry, of changing the way that the family eats within, the diet that you need in order to provide the good bacteria for your child?
Definitely. Yeah. Great question. And probably one of the most important questions. So I actually write about this also in detail. I just published my parents guidebook, which is, I think I mentioned earlier, Let Kids Be Kids, the Parents Guide to Gut Health. And in it, in part two of it, the part one is kind of a lot of what we spoke about, like what's actually going on in our bodies. But part two is like, okay, now how am I actually going to do this? And what I did is I came up with a 5-step, really easy protocol type thing. I called it actually the Buggy Protocol. So I'll explain to you guys a little bit about what I talk about in there. So in the Buggy Protocol, the first step one, is actually, I'm still not getting to the foods yet. This is actually B for be positive. The most important thing that you can do before making any changes to the foods you're eating, before talking to your kids about what's going on, is to make sure that you're going about it in a positive way. Because first of all, it's going to set the tone for whether this is going to be something that's going to empower your child, make them feel like they could make a change that's going to help them feel better. If you're positive, if you're going about it in a positive way and you're excited, this is something that can help you feel better. This is something that's going to, it's going to be a good change, versus something that they're going to want to fight. And that was my biggest concern, because that was the feedback that I got also from people who were telling me at the time, you're crazy. How are you going to make all these changes to the foods you're eating? Isn't your daughter going to feel restricted? Or I heard that kids who aren't allowed to eat junk at home, they end up just raiding their friends' pantries and they sneak it elsewhere. And, that was a legitimate concern. So I wanted to make sure that when we did this, that this would not be something that is like thought of as a restriction that you would want to hide from or sneak away from, but that it would be something that you could feel good about and create really more lifelong habits. So being positive in your attitude about health and making changes is the number one most important thing to do before you even start changing your pantry or anything.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Alana. And I think it's, as you're saying, it's so crucial to, set the intention of, this isn't to restrict the children from, enjoying the foods that they have, but it's changing that perspective of, what's going to make you, the best you possible. And, sometimes you have to be put in a vulnerable situation and maybe try something that you may not have been willing to do beforehand, but it really provides that, that step of, all right, I need to do something good for myself. And, initially you spoke a little bit about some of the things to avoid within part one of the episode. And you spoke about how, vitamins and supplements could be a good initiative. And what are some of, the vitamins and supplements that could be used to restore gut health?
Definitely. So, one of the biggest, most important supplements, I would say, is probiotics. Probiotics are literally the good bacteria that our body is missing. Probiotics, and let's just, take a step back too. I mentioned a little bit earlier how we used to eat more fermented foods, and those were packed with good bacteria. And we are just not taking in those fermented foods as much anymore. So people kind of get wary about taking supplements, and why do I need this? Why can't I get it from food? And actually, the best thing is to get that from food, by increasing the fermented foods you're eating. Things like, a lot of people think of yogurt, which is it is a fermented food, but a lot, unfortunately, of the kids' yogurts are not truly, they don't actually have those live and active cultures of good bacteria in it. And even if they do, a lot of them also have a lot of that added sugar, and food coloring that we really want to avoid. So just, but adding in like a good quality yogurt, or if you're staying away from dairy, you could also do, you know, a lot of different fermented foods, true pickles, fermented carrots. Even you could really ferment any vegetable, a lot of fruits too. Basically you just want to, that's like a really good way to get probiotics. Other than that, there are supplements. There are a lot of different types of supplements in the market now. And we used a couple of different ones with my own daughter, but we, a few of the problems we had with them were that, first of all, a lot of them are either like powders that you have to mix with something for a kid. You know, they can't really swallow pills yet. Or like a lot of the chewables are unfortunately just really poor quality, because and the gummies also, they just, you want to make sure that they have, there's certain strains to look for, and then you also want it to have enough strains of the good bacteria that it'll actually make a difference in the gut. Because what happens in a lot of these probiotics and a lot of the chewables or things like that is that they'll have a few, maybe like a few million, um, kind of like, they call it CFU count, the colony forming units. Um, and what happens is, if you don't have enough, and also certain strains are weaker than others, they might not survive the way down into the gut. You know, before it gets to the gut, it has to be digested, the stomach acid, all these different things. So a lot of these weaker strains, and if there's only a few, they could die before they even make it to start to repopulate the gut. So you really want like a higher CFU count. But even still, I'm just gonna explain. We had trouble because a lot of the powders, again, we had to mix with something, and it wasn't always so easy to get my daughter to take it. So what we're working on currently, actually, we are working with an amazing, really high quality lab on making a true fermented food probiotic, and it's going to be kind of like in pouch form, so that it's actually a true fermented food. It's going to be, and it also is going to taste delicious. You don't have to mix it with anything. It's going to be actually live and active. A lot of the supplement, or actually almost really all the supplements on the market, the powders and things like that, they are live cultures, but they're in powder form. They're dormant. They're kind of like sleeping. And then what they have to get to the gut, if they survive their way to the gut, then they have to still eat on these prebiotic foods and fibers to come alive again, slowly. But when you're eating a fermented food, those are live and active cultures. You probably heard of that term from yogurt, live and active. They are not sleeping. They're not dormant. They're ready to work right away, and they're strong, and they're going to get into the gut, and they start working right away. So that was really, I like to be as close to nature as possible, so if my daughter wasn't eating fermented foods because she didn't like the taste, then I'm making this fermented food probiotic that's going to taste delicious. So it's actually almost ready. We're just really at the very end stages of production, and hopefully we'll have it in the next couple of months. And I'll let you guys know as soon as it's out.
That's awesome. I greatly appreciate you for sharing that. And certainly when you have that ready, we'll make sure to have that linked within the show notes, and we'll make sure everybody can hear about that, so they can, start to learn more about, the insights that you're providing. Because I think, as we spoke about in part one, there can be a lot of, misleading information in terms of the way that a lot of, whether it's food, whether it's vitamins, whether it's supplements, there's a lot of, misleading marketing that does take place within our
Right.
society today. And that can lead to a lot of, issues in place of parents thinking that they're providing, the right nutrients for their child, when really it's if you look in those small details, behind the food, on the labels, it definitely can provide a lot more challenges and risks in place for someone's health. But you really spoke about some of the things that can really help, boost and restore the gut health. And as you made this transition with your daughter, can you speak about some of the results that really took place within your child's behavior, and, within kind of their own day-to-day actions, as you were restoring her gut health and taking that initiative to make a change within her life?
Definitely. And I'll also add that in terms of like supplements and things like that, a big piece of it was not only restoring the gut health, which we did with probiotics and keeping away from certain foods that are inflammatory, and eating higher quality foods, but but because of having the bacteria, the bad bacteria in her for so long, she had that chronic inflammation, and that's where a lot of these symptoms were coming from. So cooling off the inflammation was really key, and certain supplements or things like, fish oil is really helpful in reducing inflammation in the body. There are certain supplements that are, and certain foods that that help with that, and the cooling off the inflammation, healing the gut, cooling off the inflammation. These are all really key pieces to really cooling off the fire that's going on in our kids' bodies and brains, ultimately. So once we did start cooling off that fire, that's when we really started seeing a lot of those changes. So, I mean, you know, in general, first of all, just the fact that I could say something to her without having to worry about how she would react. I mean, that was like a huge change for me. She would, I'd be able to tell her no, or I'd be able to tell her something, and she would say, okay. And she was able to deal with the information. Whereas in the past, like, you would try different parenting strategies, and there are really helpful, different parenting techniques and things that you can learn. But you can only do so much when you're working with a brain that's on fire. You know what I mean? Like, you can maybe it's like, it'll be like a drop of water in a bucket, but once you actually take away the fire, I mean, it's a world of difference. So, we were able to interact so much easier. And then not only that, she actually, even while all this was going on, and she would have a lot of tantrums and things like that at home. I mean, she would even have tantrums that would last like over an hour, hours, like, and nothing. Like like I mentioned, I mean, I tried all different things, love and everything, and there was nothing that would really break through. I mean, that did not happen at all anymore after we worked on this. And then another thing that's, she was always really well behaved in school. She was quiet in school, but she didn't have any really difficulties that came out there. But I asked her teacher, and actually her teacher kind of came to me. I mean, I told her what was going on, because we also changed some of the foods she was eating in school, but she also noticed a difference, that she was much more social and interactive in the school setting. So even though she wasn't really having like any behaviors or problems before, the teacher noticed like a huge change in just her mood and her attitude and her friendliness and sociability. So I mean, that was also great. Let's see, there was she was able to, she was just so much more comfortable in general. I mean, she would have you know uh conversations with her even great grandparents, like on FaceTime. It was just easier. It wasn't like she was just you know much more easy to, interactions were easier for her. Everything was just more comfortable. She was just more comfortable, I would say.
That's amazing, and I'm sure, as it continued on, as you continued, building that gut health, the changes just continued to increase, and it certainly shows how much improvement it can make within, behavioral changes. And it's certainly something that, as you said, the quicker you do it, the better, and it can provide such great interactions within, a parent and children's relationship between each other. Within a question that I love to ask my guests, and it kind of seems you've already taken a big initiative with, really trying to take this next step of creating this probiotic. But I like to offer my guests this hypothetical question of kind of what their hope is in order to solve the issue at hand that they are, currently, providing these resources about. And I want to know, if you were basically given a large fund of, fairly large, of say even upwards of $1 billion, where would you really want to allocate these resources in order to, take the initiative of providing, resources for those parents who have children that may not have the right gut health, the right diet in place for their children today?
That's such an amazing question. I love that. And I'm getting excited thinking about it. I wish that we had that. That would be amazing. I think that I would definitely allocate it towards just awareness, trying to reach as many parents as possible, and just educate parents, also pediatricians, doctors, just to give people this information, because I feel like once they just, their mind is opened up a little bit, once they get just this little inkling of information, I mean, it opens up like a whole world for them, So just, I think that awareness in all different fields is key. I think that um and that's really like why I started making these resources. So I wrote my children's book, The Buggies in Bella's Belly, and then I wrote this parents guide. I wasn't planning to do any of these things, but um one day my daughter actually came home from school, and she, when I was explaining gut health to her and trying to keep it positive, I came up with the story for her of the good buggies and the bad buggies, and how they battle in the belly, and we want to help our good buggies win and feed our good buggies. And so she knew about this, and it really helped her in terms uh, of of understanding the changes we were making. But anyway, she came home from school one day and she asked me, like, how come everybody doesn't know, why doesn't everybody know about the good buggies and the buggies in our bellies? And I was like, you know what, you're right. We need to teach them. And I really think that just getting the word out there is the most important thing. Just reaching more people and just giving them this message, and the hope too, because a lot of people, they are dealing with these symptoms that they just, there's no one telling them how to put the pieces together, and there's no one giving them this idea of, well, maybe it could be, why don't you look into this? And if that awareness was out there, I think that it would just give hope also, and a solution to so many people in this generation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Alana. I think it's definitely a great point because, within, your circumstance, and I'm sure a lot of people as well, they have a child who maybe has behavioral changes, mood swings, or maybe certain, issues in terms of their interactions and communications. And I think some parents might not have, the education or even the awareness to just say, oh, maybe it is this. And, this awareness, as you're saying, this education can provide, an outlet for them to just identify maybe it could be gut health, and maybe they can do a little, you know, changes within their child's diet in order to, provide some of these, positive changes that can really make a large effect within, not only their mind but their body. So I want to thank you for taking this time to be here today to share some of these insights, and as well for continuing this, positive initiative within this industry.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was really, really a pleasure talking to you.
It certainly was. It was such a great time learning more about this, because I think what you're doing is so great at taking the initiative at such an early age for children today. And hopefully, as you were saying, this can help propel parents to take that step of making sure that they are providing, the right resources for their child, and leading by example as you are doing. So, I want to thank you again for taking this time, and for everyone for listening today. And I'll provide all of the resources that Alana was speaking about below in the show notes, so you can get into tune with her book, with her parents guide, and you can contact more with Alana if you need some more resources in taking that step to help your child improve their gut health. So I'd love to thank you all again for listening to this episode. This was Season 2, episode number 17 of the Mental Insights podcast. And please like, subscribe, and review to let us know what you guys thought of this episode and what more we can do to educate you on this topic. Thank you all again. This was the Mental Insights podcast with your host, Brennan Cutuli. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.